You're about to learn principles that most people either don't know or pretend don't exist. These are the rules that actually govern how power flows in organizations, relationships, and society. Whether you work in a corporate office, run a business, navigate family dynamics, or simply want to stop being pushed around by people who understand these principles better than you do. This guide will give you the tools you've been missing. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote his infamous work, The Prince, in 1513, after being tortured and exiled from the political world he'd served for 14 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, watched good men get destroyed by ruthless operators, and witnessed how the world actually works versus how everyone says it should work. What he wrote shocked Europe for centuries because he told the uncomfortable truth. The rules you were taught about being good, honest, and fair are often weaponized against you by people who don't follow them. This isn't a guide to becoming evil. This is a guide to understanding reality so you can make informed choices about how to operate within it. Some people will use these principles selfishly. Others will use them to protect what they value and achieve meaningful goals. The principles themselves are neutral. What matters is what you do with them. Let's begin with the fundamental mindset shifts you need to make. Part 1. Adopt the Machiavellian mindset. The first step is changing how you see the world. Most people operate with pleasant delusions that leave them vulnerable. You need to start seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were. Here's how to make that shift. Start by accepting that people are fundamentally self-interested, especially under pressure. This doesn't mean everyone is evil or that kindness doesn't exist. It means that when push comes to shove, most people will prioritize their own survival, advancement, and interests over yours. Stop building strategies that assume people will act against their interests out of loyalty, fairness, or principle. Instead, design your approach, assuming people will do what benefits them, and you'll rarely be disappointed. When someone acts selflessly, appreciate it as a bonus rather than expecting it as the baseline. This shift alone will save you from countless betrayals and disappointments. Next, understand that intentions don't matter nearly as much as results. You might mean well, but if your actions create chaos, you'll be judged harshly. The manager who's nice but ineffective gets fired. The friend who cares but never follows through gets abandoned. The parent who loves but fails to set boundaries raises troubled children. Stop judging yourself by your intentions and start judging yourself by outcomes. When you make decisions, ask yourself, not am I being a good person, but will this produce the result I need? This seems cold, but it's actually more ethical because it forces you to take responsibility for actual impact rather than hiding behind good intentions. Learn to think in terms of incentives rather than morality. People respond to what benefits or harms them far more reliably than they respond to what's right or wrong. If you want to predict behavior or influence outcomes, map out the incentives. What does this person gain by helping you? What do they lose by opposing you? How can you structure situations so that what's good for them aligns with what's good for you? When you understand incentives, you can create win-win scenarios instead of hoping people will do the right thing out of pure virtue. Embrace strategic pessimism. This doesn't mean being negative about everything. It means assuming things will go wrong and preparing accordingly. So you're pleasantly surprised when they go right instead of devastated when they don't. Build redundancies into your plans. Don't trust a single point of failure. Verify rather than trust. Have backup plans. The optimist who assumes everything will work perfectly is setting themselves up for disaster. The strategic pessimist who prepares for problems is setting themselves up for success. Finally, accept that you cannot opt out of power dynamics. Many people think they're above politics or not into games. This is naive. Power dynamics exist in every human interaction where resources, status, or control are at stake. Refusing to understand them doesn't make you noble. It just makes you a victim of people who do understand them. You don't have to be ruthlessly ambitious, but you do need to be aware. of how influence flows. Otherwise, you're playing a game you don't understand, while others who do understand it run circles around you. Part 2. Master the art of perception management. Machiavelli's most controversial insight was that appearing virtuous matters more than being virtuous. This sounds cynical until you realize it's simply true. People judge you by what they can observe, not by your inner character. Here's how to use this reality to your advantage. Start by understanding that your reputation is a strategic asset, not just a byproduct of your actions. Actively manage how you're perceived. This doesn't mean lying or being fake. It means being thoughtful about what you emphasize and what you downplay. If you're competent but modest to a fault, people will underestimate you. If you're generous but don't let anyone see it, you get no social credit for it. Strategic self-presentation means highlighting your strengths appropriately and being visible when you do valuable things. The person who does great work in silence often loses opportunities to people who do mediocre work loudly. Learn to calibrate your public persona to context. What works in one environment fails in another. In a corporate setting, appearing decisive and confident serves you well, even if you're uncertain. In a creative collaboration, appearing open and collaborative serves you better, even if you have strong opinions. This isn't being two-faced. It's understanding that different contexts have different expectations, and meeting those expectations is socially intelligent. The person who acts the same way everywhere, regardless of context, isn't authentic. They're inflexible. Practice the art of strategic disclosure. You don't owe everyone complete transparency about everything. Some things should remain private, not because they're shameful, but because disclosure serves no purpose and creates vulnerabilities. Share strategically. When you've made mistakes, own them. When owning them builds credibility, but don't overshare in ways that give others ammunition against you. When you have doubts, confide in trusted advisors, but project confidence to those who need to believe in your leadership. This isn't dishonesty. It's understanding that leadership requires managing others' anxiety as well as your own. Build a track record of reliability on visible commitments. Machiavelli noted that you should keep promises when keeping them serves you and break them when breaking them is necessary. The sophisticated version of this is make fewer promises, keep the ones you make meticulously, and build a reputation for reliability that gives you credibility when you do need to change course. The person who promises everything and delivers inconsistently loses all credibility. The person who promises selectively and delivers consistently can occasionally adjust course without losing trust. Control the narrative around your actions. The same action can be framed as bold leadership or reckless gambling, as necessary cost-cutting or heartless cruelty, as strategic flexibility or unprincipled flip-flopping. Get ahead of the narrative by framing your actions yourself before others do it for you. When you make a difficult decision, explain the reasoning. When you change direction, contextualize why. When you succeed, make sure people know about it. The person who lets others define them is at the mercy of whatever story serves those others' interests. Part 3. Build and maintain power strategically. Understanding power is useless if you don't know how to acquire and maintain it. Here's how to build genuine influence that lasts. Start by developing real competence. This is non-negotiable. All the strategic thinking in the world won't save you if you're actually incompetent. Machiavelli distinguished between power built on one's own arms versus power built on others' support. The former is stable, the latter precarious. Your own arms, in modern terms, means your actual skills, knowledge, resources, and capabilities. Build these relentlessly. The executive who has no real business acumen will eventually be exposed, no matter how good their political skills. The friend who offers nothing of value will eventually be abandoned, no matter how charming they are. Real capability is the foundation on which everything else is built. Once you have the capability, Focus on making it visible to the right people. Competence that nobody knows about doesn't help you. Identify who influences your opportunities and make sure they're aware of your value. This isn't bragging. It's strategic communication. When you complete a successful project, make sure relevant stakeholders know about it. When you develop new skills, find ways to demonstrate them. When you contribute to others' success, ensure they recognize your contribution. The invisible expert loses to the visible mediocrity. Build a network of genuine, reciprocal relationships. Machiavellian strategy isn't about using people. It's about creating situations where helping each other makes sense. Identify people whose goals align with yours and find ways to help them succeed. When you make others more successful, you create debts that can be called in later. But more importantly, you create genuine allies who benefit from your success. The person with a strong network of people they've helped has far more power than the person with a fancy title, but no real relationships. Never remain neutral in important conflicts. Machiavelli was adamant about this. When two powerful factions conflict, choosing a side is almost always better than staying neutral. If you stay out and one side wins, they'll resent that you didn't help. If you pick a side and they win, you've gained a powerful ally. Even if your side loses, you've demonstrated loyalty, which is valuable. The person who tries to stay friends with everyone by avoiding difficult choices often ends up trusted by no one. Understand when to be rigid and when to be flexible. Some principles are worth fighting for because backing down would destroy your credibility. Other positions can be adjusted based on new information without losing face. The key is knowing the difference. Core values and critical commitments should be non-negotiable. Tactics and specific approaches should adapt to circumstances. The leader who flip-flops on fundamental principles loses all authority. The leader who stubbornly maintains failing tactics loses relevance. Know which is which. Part 4. Navigate conflict and competition. Effectively, conflict is inevitable. How you handle it determines whether you thrive or merely survive. Here's how to approach competition strategically. When you must harm someone's interests, do it decisively and completely. Machiavelli's most brutal advice was about half measures. If you're going to make an enemy, make sure they can't retaliate effectively. If you fire someone, actually fire them, rather than creating an ambiguous situation. If you're competing for a promotion, compete to win, rather than half-heartedly trying while maintaining false friendship. If you oppose a proposal, oppose it clearly, rather than undermining it passively. Half measures create enemies without eliminating threats. The person you injure slightly becomes a dedicated enemy. The person you defeat completely either becomes irrelevant or, if you're skillful, can eventually become an ally once they've accepted the new reality. Learn when to fight and when to concede. Not every battle is worth fighting. Pick your conflicts based on what matters strategically, not based on ego or emotion. If the stakes are low, conceding gracefully often costs you nothing and builds goodwill. If the stakes are high, fight with everything you have. The person who fights every minor battle exhausts themselves and alienates everyone. The person who never fights gets walked over. Strategic selectivity means choosing your battles wisely and committing fully when you do engage. Use fear and respect, not love, as your primary tools in competitive contexts. Machiavelli asked whether it's better to be loved or feared, and concluded that fear is more reliable. This doesn't mean being cruel or hateful. It means establishing clear boundaries and consequences. In business, this means competitors and opponents need to know you'll respond forcefully to threats. In negotiations, it means the other side needs to understand your alternatives and your willingness to walk away. In organizations, it means people need to know that crossing you has costs. The person who's loved but not respected gets taken advantage of. The person who's feared but also fair gets their way. However, avoid being hated at all costs. There's a crucial difference between fear and hatred. Fear is, I don't want to cross them because there will be consequences. Hatred is, I want them to suffer regardless of cost to myself. Fear is sustainable and useful. Hatred is dangerous and destabilizing. Create fear through strength and clear consequences. Avoid hatred by never being gratuitously cruel, never humiliating people publicly, and never making things personal. The boss, who fires poor performers firmly but respectfully, is feared and respected. The boss, who humiliates people before firing them, is hated and eventually faces rebellion. Know your alternatives before entering any negotiation or conflict. Machiavelli emphasized knowing your own strength and your opponent's. In modern terms, this means understanding your partner. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you don't know what you'll do if talks fail, you have no leverage. If the other side knows you're desperate, they'll extract maximum concessions. Always have alternatives, always be willing to walk away from bad deals and make sure others know this about you. The person with options has power. The person with no options has none. Part 5. Handle loyalty, betrayal, and trust. One of the most complex aspects of Machiavellian strategy is navigating relationships in environments where loyalty is valuable. But betrayal is common. Here's how to handle it. Cultivate loyalty through benefits, not just affection. People are loyal when being loyal serves them. Make sure that those whose loyalty you need benefit tangibly from their relationship with you. This doesn't mean buying people crassly. It means creating situations where your success helps them succeed, where opposing you harms them, and where they're invested in your continued power. The boss, who promotes talented, loyal subordinates, creates genuine loyalty. The friend, who actually shows up when you need them, earns real friendship. Loyalty based purely on sentiment evaporates under pressure. Loyalty based on mutual benefit endures. Test loyalty before relying on it. Don't put someone in a critical position until you've seen how they handle smaller tests. Give people opportunities to betray you in low-stakes situations and see what they do. The employee you're considering for a sensitive role should first handle less sensitive responsibilities, reliably. The friend you're thinking of confiding in should first keep smaller confidences. The person who passes small tests of loyalty becomes more trustworthy for larger ones. The person who fails small tests has shown you who they are. Believe them. Accept that some betrayal is inevitable and plan accordingly. Don't build systems where a single betrayal destroys everything. Have redundancies. Keep certain information compartmentalized. Don't make yourself entirely dependent on any one person or relationship. This isn't paranoia, it's prudence. The person who trusts completely is maximally vulnerable. The person who trusts strategically within systems that can survive occasional betrayal is resilient. Forgive strategically, not emotionally. When someone wrongs you, the question isn't whether you feel forgiving. It's whether forgiving them serves your interests better than remaining hostile. Sometimes, genuine reconciliation makes sense because you need the relationship. Sometimes you should appear to forgive while remaining privately wary. Sometimes you should end the relationship decisively. Base this decision on strategic calculation, not on whether holding a grudge feels good. The person who forgives everyone becomes a mark. The person who forgives no one accumulates enemies unnecessarily. The person who forgives strategically maintains relationships that serve them while ending ones that don't. Recognize that loyalty has limits based on circumstances. Machiavelli observed that people's loyalty changes when their circumstances change. The subordinate who's loyal when you're powerful may abandon you when you're weak. The friend who's loyal when you're useful may drift away when you're not. This isn't necessarily malicious. It's human nature. Plan for it by building relationships where continued loyalty makes sense regardless of your circumstances, and by having multiple bases of support so you're never dependent on any single relationship. Part 6. Make decisions, like a Machiavellian. How you make decisions determines your effectiveness. Here's how to decide things the way Machiavelli would. Always consider consequences before principles. This doesn't mean having no principles. It means thinking through what actually happens if you follow a principle in a specific situation. If telling the truth will destroy someone's life for no benefit, maybe that's a time to be silent. If keeping a promise will lead to disaster, maybe that's a time to break it. Principles should guide you, not blind you. Ask yourself, what will actually happen if I do this? Then decide if that outcome is acceptable. The person who follows rules without considering consequences often does more harm than good. Use the one decisive blow approach instead of gradual pressure. When you need to make a difficult decision, make it completely and quickly. Layoffs should be done once thoroughly, rather than in waves. Firings should be definitive rather than drawn out. Changes in direction should be decisive rather than tentative. Machiavelli noted that cruelty well used is done once, swiftly, and then stopped. Cruelty, badly used, increases over time. This applies beyond literal cruelty. Any painful decision is better made decisively because it allows people to adjust and move forward rather than live in prolonged uncertainty. Consider timing carefully. The right decision at the wrong time fails. Machiavelli emphasized that fortune and timing matter enormously. Sometimes the best move is to wait because circumstances aren't favorable. Sometimes you need to act immediately before the window closes. Study the environment. Is this a time for bold action or patient waiting? Are the conditions ripe for your initiative, or do you need to let things develop? The person who acts decisively but at the wrong time looks reckless. The person who waits for perfect conditions never acts. The skilled operator judges when the moment is right. Prepare for contingencies without getting paralyzed by them. You can't plan for every possibility, but you should think through the major ways things could go wrong and have at least rough plans for handling them. If you launch a project, know what you'll do if funding falls through. If you make a career move, know what you'll do if it doesn't work out. If you confront someone, know what you'll do if they react defensively versus receptively. Don't let contingency planning prevent action, but don't act blindly either. The balance is preparing enough to be resilient while remaining flexible enough to adapt to unexpected developments. Own your decisions completely. Once you've decided something, commit to it fully. Don't hedge or create excuses in advance. This doesn't mean being inflexible if circumstances change. It means while you're executing a decision, execute it with full commitment. Half-hearted execution of good decisions often fails, while full commitment to mediocre decisions often succeeds. When you do need to change course, do it decisively and own that too. The leader who constantly second-guesses themselves loses credibility. The leader who commits, executes, learns, and adjusts as needed builds trust. Part 7. Apply Machiavellian principles ethically. Here's the critical part: how to use these tools without becoming the villain. These principles are powerful, which means they can be used for good or ill. Here's how to be strategic without being sociopathic. Define your objectives based on values, not just power. Machiavellian principles tell you how to achieve goals effectively. They don't tell you which goals are worth achieving. That has to come from your values, your conception of a good life, your sense of what matters. If your only goal is accumulating power for its own sake, these principles will turn you into exactly the kind of person Machiavelli is accused of creating. If your goals include protecting people you care about, building something meaningful, or making the world better in some specific way, these principles help you do that more effectively, despite opposition. Use manipulation defensively more than offensively. You need to understand how influence works so you can recognize when it's being used against you. You need to manage perceptions so you're not misunderstood or underestimated. You need to navigate politics so you're not destroyed by people who do understand politics. This is different from using these tools primarily to exploit others. The person who learns Machiavellian principles to defend themselves and their values is different from the person who learns them to take advantage of people. Maintain genuine relationships alongside strategic ones. Not every relationship should be calculated. Have friends you trust completely, where the relationship isn't about utility. Have communities where you contribute without constantly asking what you get back. Have values you won't compromise, regardless of strategic advantage. These anchors keep you human. They remind you that strategic thinking is a tool, not a way of life. The person who thinks strategically about everything becomes isolated and paranoid. The person who has some relationships and spaces free from strategic calculation stays grounded. Be more Machiavellian than your opponents, but not more than necessary. Scale your strategic intensity to the environment. In a cutthroat corporate environment or high-stakes negotiation, you may need to employ these principles extensively. In a healthy collaborative environment or genuine friendship, you need them much less. Don't bring nuclear weapons to every conflict. The person who's equally strategic in every context is exhausting and untrustworthy. The person who can scale their approach appropriately builds both effectiveness and genuine relationships. Remember that effectiveness serves larger purposes. You're learning these principles for a reason. Maybe to advance your career so you can support your family. Maybe to build an organization that does good work. Maybe to protect yourself from toxic people. Maybe to change an unjust system. Keep that larger purpose in mind. When you're tempted to do something purely for power, ask yourself if it serves your actual objectives or just your ego. The person who accumulates power as an end in itself often ends up powerful but empty. The person who uses power strategically to serve larger purposes builds something meaningful. Part 8. Common mistakes to avoid. Even people who understand Machiavellian principles often fail in predictable ways. Here's what to avoid. Don't confuse being feared with being hated. This is perhaps the most common mistake. Some people read Machiavelli's advice about fear being more reliable than love and think this means being cruel, harsh, or aggressive. That's wrong. Fear should come from strength and clear consequences, not from arbitrary cruelty or personal attacks. The boss who fires poor performers clearly and professionally is feared. The boss who yells at people and humiliates them is hated. The competitor who fights hard but fair is feared. The competitor who plays dirty and makes things personal is hated. Hatred creates dedicated enemies who'll work against you, even at a cost to themselves. Fear creates respect that can later turn to genuine loyalty. Don't mistake appearance for reality in yourself. It's easy to focus so much on appearing competent that you neglect actually becoming competent. Remember, perception management is a supplement to real capability, not a substitute. The person who's all appearance and no substance gets exposed eventually. Build real skills, real knowledge, real capabilities first. Then manage how they're perceived. Don't reverse the order. Don't become so strategic that you can't adapt. Machiavelli himself noted that people fail when they can't change their approach to match changing circumstances. If you develop a strategic style that works, you'll be tempted to keep using it even when circumstances change. The person who succeeded through aggressive competition may keep being aggressive when collaboration would serve better. The person who rose through political maneuvering may keep maneuvering when straightforward execution would work better. Stay flexible. Let tactics serve objectives, not the other way around. Don't isolate yourself through excessive strategic thinking. If you approach every interaction as a potential power play, if you trust no one, if you calculate constantly, you'll end up alone. Humans need genuine connection. Building a life where everything is strategic and nothing is spontaneous leads to paranoia and isolation. Have spaces and relationships where you're not strategizing. Otherwise, you'll become exactly the kind of cold manipulator that Machiavelli gets accused of advocating for. Don't ignore the long-term consequences of short-term victories. Some moves win you immediate gains, but cost you credibility, relationships, or positioning long-term. Be willing to accept short-term costs for long-term advantages, and don't sacrifice long-term strength for short-term wins. The person who burns bridges constantly for immediate gains eventually runs out of bridges. The person who sometimes accepts short-term disadvantages to build lasting strength ends up far ahead. Part 9. Advanced Machiavellian strategies. Once you've mastered the basics, here are more sophisticated applications. Learn to shape the environment rather than just responding to it. Beginners react to circumstances. Experts create circumstances. Don't just adapt to the political landscape in your organization. Actively shape it by building coalitions, controlling information flow, and framing issues. Don't just respond to market conditions. Try to influence them through strategic moves. Don't just accept social dynamics. Structure situations to your advantage. The person who only reacts has limited power. The person who shapes the game has much more. Master the art of strategic patience. Sometimes the best move is waiting for circumstances to change in your favor. Machiavelli emphasized that different situations favor different approaches. If bold action would fail now, but time is on your side, wait. Build your position. Let opponents make mistakes and allow circumstances to evolve. The impulsive person acts too soon and wastes opportunities. The patient strategist waits for the right moment and then acts decisively. Use controlled transparency strategically. Sometimes revealing your constraints or limitations actually strengthens your position. If people know you genuinely have no authority to approve something, they stop pressuring you and direct energy elsewhere. If they know you have genuine alternatives, they take you more seriously. If they see you have real limitations, they may offer help rather than trying to exploit you. Don't reflexively hide everything. Sometimes strategic disclosure of constraints or vulnerabilities makes you more effective, not less. Build a reputation in one area to gain freedom in others. If you establish a rock-solid reputation for integrity in financial matters, people are less likely to question you in other areas. If you're known for deep expertise in one domain, you get more credibility when commenting on others. Build specific reputational assets that give you credibility more broadly. The person who's trusted completely in one important area often gets extended trust more generally. Create systems that protect you from your own weaknesses. Machiavelli noted that people can't easily change their nature. You have patterns and tendencies that sometimes work against you. Instead of fighting your nature, build systems that compensate. If you tend toward impulsive decisions, create processes that slow you down. If you tend toward excessive caution, create accountability that forces action. If you tend to trust too easily, create verification systems. Don't rely on willpower to overcome your nature. Design your environment and processes to root around your weaknesses. Part 10. Living with Machiavellian knowledge. The final challenge is integrating this knowledge into your life without letting it corrupt you or paralyze you. Accept the tension between ideals and reality. You now understand how power actually works, which is often at odds with how you wish it worked. This tension doesn't go away. You'll constantly face situations where doing the right thing in an ideal world conflicts with what's effective in the real world. Don't try to resolve this tension with simple answers. Sometimes you'll choose ideals over effectiveness and accept the costs. Sometimes you'll choose effectiveness over ideals and live with the moral complexity. The mature approach is making these choices consciously and honestly, rather than pretending the conflict doesn't exist. Recognize that knowledge creates responsibility. Now that you understand how manipulation works, you can't pretend to be naive. You know when you're being influenced strategically. You know how to influence others. You know the gap between appearance and reality. This knowledge means you're responsible for how you use it. The person who understands these principles and uses them selfishly is more culpable than the person who simply doesn't know better. Your knowledge is power, and power carries moral weight. Remember that these are tools, not a philosophy of life. Machiavellian principles tell you how to be effective in competitive domains. They don't tell you how to find meaning, build genuine connections, develop character, or live a good life. Don't let strategic thinking crowd out other ways of being. There are contexts for calculation and contexts for spontaneity, times for strategy and times for vulnerability, relationships where you need to protect yourself and relationships where you can be completely open. Know the difference. Stay connected to purposes beyond power. Whatever made you want to learn these principles in the first place, whether it was advancing your career, protecting yourself, building something meaningful, or changing a system, keep that purpose central. Let these tools serve those purposes, rather than letting the accumulation of power become an end in itself. The person who learns a strategy to serve something they care about stays grounded. The person for whom power becomes the only goal becomes hollow. Practice self-awareness continuously. The greatest danger of Machiavellian thinking is losing touch with yourself. When you're constantly managing perceptions, it's easy to lose track of what you actually think and feel. When you're always calculating, you can forget how to be spontaneous. When you're strategic about relationships, you can forget what a genuine connection feels like. Build practices that keep you in touch with yourself. Journaling, therapy, genuine friendships, time alone, whatever works for you. The person who becomes completely identified with their strategic persona has lost something essential. Conclusion. Your path forward. You now have the knowledge that Machiavelli gained through years in the brutal politics of Renaissance Italy. You understand how power flows, how people actually behave under pressure, how systems really work rather than how they're supposed to work. This knowledge is valuable and dangerous in equal measure. The question now is what you'll do with it. Some people will use these principles to become more effective at achieving selfish goals. They'll manipulate, calculate, and accumulate power for its own sake. They'll become the villains that Machiavelli is accused of creating. That's a choice, but it's not the only choice, and probably not a wise one. People who live purely for power tend to end up isolated, paranoid, and empty even when they succeed. Other people will use these principles defensively and strategically in the service of something larger. They'll understand office politics well enough to protect their team's resources. They'll negotiate effectively enough to secure fair deals. They'll manage perceptions well enough to be taken seriously. They'll build power to serve purposes they care about. They'll be strategic when strategy is needed and genuine when genuineness is possible. They'll navigate the world as it is while working toward the world as it should be. The difference between these paths isn't the techniques, it's the purposes those techniques serve and the constraints you place on yourself in using them. It's whether you have genuine relationships alongside strategic ones. It's whether you stay connected to values beyond effectiveness. It's whether power is a tool or an end in itself. Here's your practical starting point. Begin observing power dynamics in your actual life with new eyes. Watch how decisions really get made in your organization. Notice who has informal influence beyond formal authority. See how perceptions shape outcomes. Understand the incentives driving behavior around you. Don't judge, just observe. Understanding the game is the first step. Then start making small, strategic adjustments. Manage your visibility more deliberately. Build one or two genuinely useful relationships. Set clearer boundaries in one area where you've been too accommodating. Make one decision based on likely consequences rather than just principles. Practice the art of strategic thinking in low-stakes situations where mistakes won't cost you much. As you get more comfortable with these principles, scale up their application based on the environment. In highly competitive contexts, use them extensively. In collaborative environments, use them sparingly. In genuine friendships, use them barely at all. Calibrate your approach to what the situation demands. Throughout all of this, maintain your connection to purposes beyond power. Keep relationships where you're not calculating. Preserve spaces where you can be yourself without strategy. Stay in touch with values that matter to you. Let effectiveness serve these larger purposes rather than becoming an end in itself. Machiavelli showed us how the world works. He gave us tools for navigating it effectively. But he couldn't tell us, and didn't try to tell us, what makes a life worth living or what purposes are worth serving. That's up to you. The strategic thinking is just a tool. What you build with it, what you protect with it, what you achieve with it, that's where your character and choices matter. Use this knowledge wisely. Use it to protect what you value, achieve what you care about, and navigate a complex world without being destroyed by it. Use it to be effective without being cruel, strategic without being soulless, and powerful without being corrupted by power. That's the challenge and the opportunity that Machiavellian wisdom offers. The rest is up to you.